Hello, I am sitting here with my friend Dan Tully, who is an elder care attorney, pardon me, at Kilbourne and Tully. And I said the same thing to Kathleen, is that we could go on all day about his impressive resume, but that's not what
Thank you.
we're not here to do. And people can Google you if they want to. We are here to talk about policy and legal issues that come up with aging. And gosh, you're really just everything backward and forward, and you're always reading. So I'm just going to ask you open questions.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, this is the best. I love sitting around with obviously this is great. I just get to talk to my friends.
Yep.
But what are the newest changes? You can either pick federal or state government changes that are affecting our elders.
Well, probably the biggest change right now is what President Biden is suggesting in the expansion of funding of home care, which, let's face it, most elders would rather stay in their own home than have to go into a long-term care facility. And I think that the Biden administration is aware of that, and they're exploring as part of their stimulus package is expanding the use across the country of more funding for home care. And I think that's a positive step in the right direction for when we talk about the quality of someone's life,
Sure.
their dignity,
Sure.
and respecting what their wishes are. So that's a big change.
Do you know how the money would come through? Would it come through Medicaid and Medicare, or?
It would come through most likely more so Medicaid, Title 19,
Okay.
than Medicare, but it would be an expansion of the use of home care, and I think it's a very positive change amongst all the negative things we've seen in the past year. So
100%. I mean, I always want to throw out my statistics about, the fact that we're in need of caregivers themselves, and that we don't have enough caregivers. So, obviously it's great that they're expanding it so that there's more funding for it, but we're also going to have to, in my humble opinion, change the salary for these workers.
rightfully so.
And value them.
Right.
And value them.
Absolutely. Because if you look across the country, there are so many unpaid caregivers, which are family members,
Sure.
which are somewhat being abused by the system in that they're giving up jobs, they're giving up their lives to take care of their loved ones. And that's something that is both on the state level and the federal level being recognized, that family members can be compensated for caring for their loved ones.
Yes, that is actually included with this proposal as well.
Right.
I know that that's happening, and I know that a lot of family members had to do it due to the pandemic. They moved their loved one in, and then a lot of people. I know somebody very, very wealthy who invited a caregiver and her family to move into their home for infection control. She didn't want anybody coming or going, and obviously not everybody has that kind of money, those kinds of resources. So I know that some people, they closed the home care service that they were using to for infection control. So that's great. So I'm gonna check that out. Biden, it's part of Biden's stimulus package. That's fantastic. And how if elders don't hear about this, these changes, and they don't know that they are entitled to these benefits, how are they going to find the information? Where should they go? Where should they be looking?
Well, one excellent source of information is the local senior centers. Here in Bristol, we're very lucky to have Silver Source, which is an excellent agency that helps seniors all throughout the Stamford area, but also online, if they're capable, if they do those types of things. And many different professional groups give free seminars on what are some of the changes in the laws, Medicare, Medicaid, estate taxation. That's a great way to learn about some of the things that definitely impact their life.
Yeah. I'm laughing though too, because at the same time I took a healthcare policy class, and part of it we were like, oh my gosh, it's even if you're sitting in on that seminar, it's not clear how does this affect me. You always bring it down, and I appreciate you. That's why I asked you to come and talk. You make it all very simple. You're like, listen, there's going to be more money for Medicaid, and you're going to, receive more home care hours. And if you don't have home care hours yet, you can get them.
Yeah, well, I was blessed to start my legal career working for then Attorney General Joe Lieberman.
Okay.
And that was one of the things that he taught us, was that you have to speak in layman's language. And
Yeah.
you can't speak legalese and try to impress people with that. You have to have people understand what the law is about and make it work for them.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I appreciate you for that, because I don't get most of it. So, and I would add too. As I was writing these questions, I thought, AARP is really so good. The magazine is so good,
Right.
and obviously I'm a geriatric nerd, so I have a family member who saves the magazine for me, and I read it second. Like that's my reading material on the weekends, and. They also do. They break it down and they let you know, the scams that are going on, and what else have I read? They also were very, very transparent at the height of the pandemic. I remember the magazine from December 2020 where they were just talking about the numbers in the skilled nursing facilities, and who was safe and what was going on.
Right.
So let me ask you this: how can poor elders plan ahead? People of low socioeconomic status. Like, what if and I know that I can't. What if I can't afford you?
Yeah. We do pro bono work.
Oh, you do.
And there's a lot of the Connecticut Bar Association has a pro bono committee, and a lot of different groups offer free seminars to discuss these things. There's also Connecticut Legal Aid, which is very important. And a lot of senior centers are connected with ways in which seniors can get their legal affairs in order for relatively inexpensive.
Oh, that's incredible. I didn't know that, because obviously, like we were joking before we started videoing that I just call my lawyer for free. Okay, so that's great. And obviously people who have more finances can contact, a company like yours, and what would an elder care attorney provide? What should they be looking for? What are the services that they should do?
Well, first and foremost, they should work with someone they feel comfortable with and they trust. Mm-hmm. We often offer free consultations just so we can get to meet the prospective clients and they get to meet us.
Sure.
And before any work is done, you would be told basically what it's going to cost, or at least what the parameters are. And in the state of Connecticut, there's always a retainer agreement going over what will be done and how much it will cost.
Oh,
but it's oftentimes people that come to see us, they say, wow, I'm glad I got these documents done, because I've been putting it off for years because I've been so afraid of what the costs are, and this is not bad at all.
Oh, great. So that's a great point too. Right. And then and you're planning end of life stuff, you're talking about real issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Yeah, we often talk about families having the talk. And part of that is, if the child is in their 40s, children in their 40s, and mom and dad are 70 or older, you really need to start having the talk and getting prepared of what could happen down the road. And part of that is things we don't want to talk about.
Right.
We don't want to talk about death and dying. We don't want to talk about our failing health. But if we discuss it in advance, it makes life that much easier if a crisis were to occur. Yeah,
and also I think that not talking about death and dying is very much societal for the United States. Right. Everybody's so afraid, and we take every preventative measure to live and accept every surgery that comes up or that's offered, when I would hope, and this is something we talked about with Allison, was that people would take the time to talk. And as we know from healthcare policy, that doctors don't always get paid to talk. They get paid, especially with the bundles, they get paid for a surgery. Mm-hmm. They have to do the follow-up, but they're not necessarily paid for that appointment. And then who's talking? Like, who's talking? Who's saying, a hip surgery at 96 might not be the best.
Right.
I've just seen, I always bring up the hip surgery because I've seen so many people pass after them. But I do have a great story, actually. Yeah. A friend of mine, and I say friend, he was in his 90s, mid to late 90s. And he says to me, he was blind, he walked with a walker. He's like, I'm gonna have heart surgery. And I was like, really? And he's like, like, yeah. He's like, they just go in, you know, with a little something, they do a heart surgery, and they say, I'll feel better. And I was like, okay. And he's like, if my quality of life can improve.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating. I mean, this gentleman was, as I say, like a doer. You know, he was going to rehab himself. He had worked his whole life.
Yeah.
He had come from absolutely nothing, and worked to achieve what he had. So he rode around in a wheelchair for probably a week or two, you know, as his circulatory system rehabilitated, and he got back to walking.
Wow.
It was incredible.
Success story.
It was like,
I love hearing stories like that.
I do, because, and we were talking about this before too, like we all have our own biases, and my biases are so old world.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't go to a doctor, you don't you don't say yes to any surgery after 80. You know, I have my own biases.
Mm-hmm.
We all do, but he improved his quality of life, which is incredible.
Fantastic
It's a
story.
great story. So, yeah, so having the talk with aging parents. I'm going to be a little political for a minute, because I know that you and I are on the same page with so many things. But I was going to ask you if you knew about the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, A-L-E-C.
I'm not aware of that.
You are not, and I'm going to send it to you.
Okay.
But you can also Google on YouTube. Bill Moyers did an incredible just expose on ALEC. Because otherwise, if I were to tell you about it, it sounds like conspiracy theory, or
Right.
I sound super liberal, or you know, any of these things. But ALEC, it's a legislative body made up of our biggest corporations in the United States. So the one that offends me the most is the American Bail Coalition, which obviously, you know, our for-profit policing and our for-profit prison systems and everything are buying into the ability to create policy and to lobby for policy. But it's also, you know, it's Walmart, and it's AT&T, and it's Pfizer, and it's Exxon, and it's State Farm,
Right.
which also they have the cutest little commercials that look like culturally competent and with the red shirts and everything, but they are, you know, a huge corporation that's getting together with other people to affect policy for aging, for
Right.
Medicaid and
And
Medicare.
that's where our seniors, our elders, need to be aware that they have the numbers.
Yeah.
And a
Oh, that's
great
interesting.
book written years ago by Dr. Ken Dykewall called Age Power talks about what's happening right now is the aging of the baby boomers and the sheer number of what we have. And with that, we have a mobile electoral base
Wow.
to make changes in this country. And we just have to tap into that so that senior rights and senior issues are at the forefront.
I have not read that book, and
Yeah.
you know I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go get it.
Yeah,
That
it's
sounds
fantastic.
great.
Yeah.
It is. It's an exciting time because the boomers are young. They are highly educated, many times liberal because of the social justice issues that they fought for, and maybe they will create a more socially just or livable society for everyone.
Right.
That would be great. What a great book. I'm going to check that out. Okay, what else should we talk about? Goodness. Oh, having the conversation. I wanted to ask you too, because I did read some of your questions. How do we preserve autonomy and dignity when we're trying to have that talk? Because as you mentioned in one of the things that I read, you write so much too. I mean, you're publishing once a week. And,
Right.
How do we preserve autonomy when we're saying to an elder, it's time to sit down with your kids to talk about your quality of life?
Yeah.
Because these are people who took care of everybody else.
Well, the amazing thing about that, Eleni, is that the parents, the seniors, are more willing to talk than their children are. There was a study
That's
done by Boston College that showed that the parents want to talk, the kids don't.
Huh.
And part of having the talk is that I'm not giving up any of my rights, I'm not giving up any of my autonomy, but I want this person to be able to speak on behalf of my healthcare issues. I want this person to be able to handle my financial affairs, and that's extremely important that be done in advance before a crisis. That's not the time to try to do your legal documents or just to have the discussion. You know, how do I want my end of life issues? What are my values? What are my wishes? Could be totally different, and they are totally different from person to person.
That's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that perspective, and I appreciate you,
Right.
of course, having the research you were going to. It's interesting. I did have a client who, let's say in a short-term rehab situation, in a one-to-one situation, did want to talk about end of life and did want to have that conversation, and the family was more, like you said, more reticent, or it's really them losing their parent. They're planning to lose
Right.
their parent, which has all kinds of emotions around that.
Right. Well, one thing we've both seen in the past year, because of this horrible pandemic,
Yeah.
it's brought to the forefront that we need to talk about
Yes.
end of life issues. We need
Yes.
to address it, and we can't just, put it under the carpet. It has to be something discussed and decided. What are our next steps? What are we going to do in the case of an end of life issue?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, this year, yeah. Yep. Lots of Zoom and FaceTime,
Right.
and for me being on the side with the elder, and what was interesting too, I hadn't even considered. Sometimes the child, right? So the child is also an elder. The child is a senior themselves. They're over 65, and they might have had their own medical issues, which
Right.
made it impossible for them to leave their home to visit the elder in the long-term care facility.
Right.
So there was all kinds of stuff this year. Yeah. So there's in Connecticut it's different, the year-end planning, and then you talked about also youth planning. Do you want to talk about any of this for us?
Sure. The one thing that people need to be aware of if they're getting advice from their cousin who may live in Queens and we're here in Connecticut, two different states, two different laws, you got to be really careful. And
Yeah.
if someone's talking about that they're a married couple as opposed to a widow or single person, different rules apply there too.
Huh.
We want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. So, because different states, vastly different between Connecticut and New York as far as
crazy for social work
Medicaid.
too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing that some people think, oh, I'm too young. I don't need legal documents. That's not true. Even if you have children, you definitely where would your child go if you passed?
I know.
Who
I
would
need
be
to
the
do
guardian?
it too. I know.
Who would be the trustee
know.
of any funds? Even if you don't have children, who
Yeah.
do you want in charge of your estate? It may not be a family member. It may be a close friend.
Yes.
And if you don't put it in writing, it can make a Jerry Springer-esque type situation
Yes.
could
Yes.
evolve.
Yes,
So.
that's so true. And we have, I'm
And-
sure
and
you
we have
had
them right
them.
here in
Yeah,
Stamford.
yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, that's something also that Kathleen at Silver Source brought up, is she brought up, family stresses, and that sometimes
Right.
elders in poverty just have no one, not because everyone's passed away, but because of
right.
Jerry Springer-esque type situations. But I appreciate all your time, and I don't want to keep you all day. So I will ask you, as I ask everybody, do you have a plan? What's your aging fantasy? Or I know you have kids as well.
Well,
So.
my plan going
Yeah.
forward is to try to reach as many seniors as I can to protect them and to make sure that their wishes are carried out. I had a colleague in one of my towns that I have one of my 4 offices in
Yeah.
who practiced into his 90s, and
Oh!
I may go after that
Yes!
record.
Yeah, you will.
So,
Yeah, you will. That's
I think
true.
I had a grandmother who worked into her 90s in
Me
our family
too.
business,
Oh, yeah.
and it kept her young.
That's
kept
true.
her young, and a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And we all have these fantasies about playing golf and not having to work and sitting by a pool. And some people retire and they're very disappointed.
Yes.
And my goal is just to keep going and hopefully see some more legislative changes that would benefit seniors both here in Connecticut and across the country.
That's great. I appreciate that, and I look forward to knowing you while you're
Right,
working well
right.
into your 90s. I'll add to that. There was a great documentary. Gosh, it was either public television or NPR, one of these types of things that I was watching online, and it was a woman in her 90s who had been trading stocks and everything like that her entire life. Now, yes, she was doing it on her phone, but she was sitting at her desk and calling people up and hollering at people. And I was like, I think I would rather give her my money If I had it,
Yeah.
you know, then the 20-year-old who's like getting out of school, she knew what she was doing.
Right?
And so, yeah, age is only a number.
Exactly.
It is only
Exactly.
a number. Well, I appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yep,
Thanks for having me.
Let me shut this off.